Now, giant birds in the skies, probably can't see that too well, but that's like a cracked open egg and a bunch of guys stood next to the egg. I'm sure that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's actually not too much of an exaggeration. That's actually a life-size replica of the largest bird that ever lived. It's called Argentivus, and it actually had a wingspan up to 23 feet. And we actually have fossilized remains of this particular bird, and you can see how big it grew to. But I mean, it became extinct literally millions and millions of years ago in the Jurassic era. But it demonstrates how big birds can grow. Now, the fact that we've got fossils, you know, is interesting from millions of years ago. But what's more amazing is that we actually get a lot of reports today of people seeing something that looks like that, sort of a bird with a wingspan of anywhere from sort of 15 to 20 feet. Now, in theory, the creatures could exist because we know in history they existed. That's one of them. The problem, of course, is in a highly populated 21st century, how could they exist and not be found, identified, captured or killed? Well, of course, the big question is it would be extremely difficult for them to live. But nevertheless, people report them. And to go back to Ken Gerhard, Ken wrote a book a few years ago called Big Bird, which is a very sort of appropriate title, and it deals with sightings of anomalous large birds, not just in the US, but around the world. And Ken placed a lot of emphasis on Texas. And he's got a lot of reports from down by the, particularly San Antonio, down towards the Mexico border is where we get a lot of these reports. And in some respects, they sound like the Native American stories of thunderbirds. Now, the thunderbirds are a large, essentially like a huge bird in their culture. And the name the thunderbird actually comes from the beating of the wings. It was supposed to sound like thunder. Now, of course, many people just relegate these stories to, you know, to mythology or folklore. But if you try telling that to the witnesses, you get a very different answer. And Ken has literally got dozens of stories, and I'm sure he still gets them regularly now, but dozens of stories of people seeing these huge birds just sort of soaring through the skies of Texas. And I've spoken to a lot of these witnesses, and it's very, very difficult to write off the testimony. You know, they come across as just regular, credible people. So, as I said, the idea that something like that could exist isn't at all impossible because things like that did exist. Where could they live? That's, you know, that's the bigger problem. I do find it interesting that a lot of reports come from the Texas-Mexico area, particularly in the mountainous terrains. And that would actually make a lot of sense because something like that, 23-foot wingspan, you know, it's not going to take off from the car park outside here. Many of these birds, and also things like the pterosaurs from the Jurassic period, like pterodactyls, there's a lot of theories that they actually lived on higher ground and they would have to sort of literally launch themselves off cliff tops to sort of be able to fly in the thermals, that they might not actually have the strength and ability to take off from a flat surface like an aircraft would on a runway. They would have to sort of take off like a hang glider would, and then you would catch the air. So again, it's not impossible that these things could exist if they are existing in mountainous terrains that are not well traveled, you know, not many people around, and most people who might see them might not want to talk about it for fear of ridicule. So in that sense, I don't rule it out. In fact, I don't rule it out at all because of the credibility of the witnesses. But we could be looking at another angle as well, which sort of takes it down a more paranormal angle, if you like, where, you know, people suggest that these things are sort of flitting in and out of other dimensions from somewhere else. And I know Ken's got a few reports like that. So I'm not entirely sure if these reports, at least, should fall into the realm of cryptozoology. Cryptozoology is the study of unknown animals. But occasionally you get these crossover cases where it seems to have a few more sort of supernatural aspects to it. And maybe that's where, you know, with these cases, that's what we get with the big bird cases. But, You know, it could still go down the physical path, and we're still getting reports. So there's clearly a real phenomenon.